house in Baltimore. Activities, the Ravens get back on the field, and of course the Terps playing football and basketball, Caps, Wizards, and all that stuff. But all eyes on the baseball general managers this week as they make their way down to Orlando, Florida. This guy covers all things baseball. He was running around with the World Series from Los Angeles to Houston and all sorts of weather conditions, all 7 games into the middle of the night. He's one of our favorites. He covers the Yankees professionally up in Newsday Sports and up in New York on Long Island. You can find him out on Twitter at eboland11. We welcome back one of our defending champions, Erik Boland, to not just recap all things 2017, but Erik, around here, I mean, the Orioles this offseason, this may be as crucial and pivotal an offseason as we're going to have in the next 5 years. And they don't do off seasons well around here, Erik. They don't.
You know, I mean, I cover the Yankees, so I'm not as familiar with what the Orioles are doing on a day-to-day basis, certainly. But you know, obviously a critical off season for the Orioles, and you know, a few free agents, obviously quite a few holes that they have to fill. And you know, they're not one of the teams, at least going into this off season, that you hear a lot of buzz about, and that doesn't necessarily always translate into activity or inactivity. The surrounding buzz with a team, but you know, it seems like the prevailing opinion is going into next year that the Orioles, aren't going to be very good. But, Dan Duquette's also a guy that a lot of times kind of operates under the radar, so to speak, and will pull some rabbits out of the hat now and then. So, I think the most interesting thing with the Orioles, and I say this from afar and not with any inside information whatsoever, because, again, I cover the Yankees on a day-to-day basis. I'm not a national baseball writer or anything like that, but just my own curiosity is, at this time next year, will Buck Showalter still be the manager of the Orioles? That, to me, is one of the more intriguing questions about the franchise.
Well, I think everything's intriguing. From Machado, where he'll be, Adam Jones, who's their franchise player. Buck and Dan are married together, going into sort of a lame duck situation. Duquette tried to run off to Toronto. We know Mr. Angelos doesn't allow people to leave contracts early. You have rumors about Showalter to the Phillies, and everything that's going on up there with Clintack and with Andy McPhail. But the Yankees and the Red Sox, and I know you cover the Yankees, stand in the middle of all of this because they were always the place you would judge yourself when you're winning 67, 69, 74 games a year, as they did for a decade and a half. And the Yankees and the Red Sox over the last 5 years, their demise and they're going in too deep on bad contracts and not having young players to come in and replace the Riveras and the Jeters and all those guys going out the door, that was a problem. And the Orioles, and I think the Blue Jays, took advantage of that for a period of time, a very short period of time. And as much as we're going to talk about Buck and Dan and who's going to be here and all that, you guys up in New York, there was not a whole lot of speculation that Girardi was going to be exiting out the trap door. That had to have been a shocker for you and a lot of people there, because I didn't hear anything like, well, we wonder if Girardi's going to be back next year. I've heard a lot of, we wonder if Showalter's going to be back. But the Girardi thing really strikes a new day in New York, and certainly a power play for Cashman and Steinbrenner, right?
Well, look, the fascinating thing about the Girardi narrative was that, and I wrote this too, I put myself at the front of the line who got this wrong, as among the people that cover this on a day-to-day basis. The narrative was basically, if Joe Girardi is not back in 2018, it was going to be on his own volition, because he just decided after 10 years in the pressure cooker that is the Yankees manager job that he just wanted to step away for a year or two, spend some time with the family, recharge the batteries, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody, as you mentioned, was writing about a potentially frayed relationship between Cashman and Girardi, and problems in the clubhouse with communication with some of the younger players that obviously this team is built around, and that they hope is the nucleus of another, maybe not dynasty, but certainly a team that's a contender on a yearly basis for the next decade or so. You didn't hear or read about any of that. And what's fascinating about that is that this is New York, with the most amount of reporters that cover a team on a day-to-day basis. And that was basically a secret that was kept by Brian Cashman and managing general partner Hal Steinbrenner. Hands down, that was something that obviously Cashman made that decision well before he informed Girardi about it. So you're talking about probably back as far as May, June, July when Cashman started thinking he wanted to go in another direction with the manager. And in New York, you didn't hear a word of that. And I think that what's really fascinating is the fact they were able to keep that a secret, and that none of that got out until after the fact.
Well, you said you were not predictive of this. I don't know that anybody was predictive of this.
No,
right?
Nobody was. Look, Nestor. I read the stuff on a day-to-day basis. I want to see what my competitors have. I want to see what national reporters have, et cetera, et cetera. And you didn't read word one of any of that. And so, yeah, that was it's one of the few secrets in our business that actually was kept under wraps. And again, I think it was just because there were only two people that knew it, and there are two people that Cashman can keep a secret when he wants to, and Hal Steinbrenner really doesn't talk to anyone in terms of being a media leak.
Well, I mean, Washington's been through this. Boston went through. I mean, getting managers thrown out the side door who've won 90 games. 'Tis the season, right? I mean, it's not just going on in New York at this point, and really a little bit of its personality. And I think in some places, and certainly in Washington, and you've been around this long enough, like I have been. There used to be just a world of a bunch of old white guys that ran baseball that chewed tobacco and had their jugs guns, and that's how baseball was evaluated, that and statistical analysis. Now we're like way past that point where the nerds are running the game and the scouts are they have to catch up to the sabermetrics, and if they're not, they're being shown the side door. I mean, we're getting into an all saber universe and an all nerd universe at this point, right?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't. That's your description of it. I wouldn't go that far with the nerds, but look, I mean, certainly the game has trended towards analytics. But what was interesting with Girardi was that he was all in on that type of stuff. I mean, he sometimes balked at suggestions that came from the guys upstairs. That's sort of the description people in the Yankees uniforms use for what is the largest analytics department actually in the majors, but. Joe Girardi was pretty much in on that. He occasionally, like I said, would push back on it, but he was not stretching the imagination. And that's kind of the decision to go in a different direction. Even more was that it really came down to what and agreed with what Cashman determined to be a communication issue, and then a personal communication issue between Girardi and players in the clubhouse.
He is Erik Boland. He is eBoland11. That's 11 out on Twitter as well, covering all things Yankees for Newsday. You can follow him at newsday.com as well as out on Twitter. For the Yankees in the year that they had, and I know I had you on off-season. I try to visit with you every couple of months around here. I know we get together and play a lot of baseball together during the course of the season, but I don't know that anybody could have been predictive of the Yankees' success this year. The Red Sox were the sort of the flavor of the off-season, and the Orioles and the Blue Jays were coming off strong campaigns, but this version of the Yankees this year, I think, came as a shock to a lot of people, including themselves. But I think it really does sort of, be predictive of the future of everybody else should be very, very wary here, because we're going to talk about Machado in this offseason, and I don't think anybody thinks he's going to get dealt. But there are very few people that don't think that he has some thoughts about wearing a Yankees uniform this time next year. And the Yankees have a lot of money, but are also trying to sort of play that down for the tax on the cap as well. It's very, very complicated from the Yankees' perspective, as well as the Dodgers and some others, as to how much money they're going to be able to spend, because Lord knows they have the money, right?
Well, look, Hal Steinbrenner is not his father. People have not woken up to that fact, even though his father, George Steinbrenner, died in 2010, and Hal got a kick